Micro drag is simply drag that is indiscernible to our eyes. It can be the slightest of classic line tension drag across current seams, surface meniscus tension drag, or trout-induced drag. Tom Rosenbauer and I have argued about this video for years. Which is it? Talk about splitting hairs. Welcome to the obsessive world of micro drag. It's interesting to study and a sure sign you're wanting to understand a little deeper, so let's have a look. The first instance of micro drag is classic drag. We've cast from the wrong angle or too long a cast relative to the trout's position and cross seam lines, across variable current speeds. Every fly angler has experienced this drag because we're almost always dealing with current discrepancies. A brilliant example of this type of micro drag occurred when our friend laid out a nice cast upstream and slightly across this rising rainbow. In real time, the four of us watched and swore the rainbow had nosed a refusal at her fly. Upon slow motion review at home, the rainbow turned downstream at the last second to eat her fly at the exact time her drift was over, and the leader and tippet were beginning to arc and drag. Because it was a downstream take angled away from us, the dragging line pulled through the trout's mouth, and that was it. We can limit this micro drag by positioning ourselves in the same current seam as the trout, not leading it too much, using lighter and more supple tippet. A light pile cast is also effective in tough scenarios, though good basic casting and mending through the entire drift is usually all that's needed. Surface tension drag gets interesting and is subtly different because we're now looking at the stiffness of the leader and tippet material and how it interacts with the meniscal layer of water. The interaction can cause such minuscule drag that while we can't see it, trout will come to an absolute stop right behind our fly with their pectoral fins flared. They simply won't eat. This is critical in slow currents. There's also a function of the length of stiffer material relative to the length of supple tippet material that can cause nunchucking swings of the limp, lighter tippet. A well-tapered leader with an additional 18 to 24 inches of more supple 4 or 5x tippet is highly effective. And for the obsessive, another factor on micro drag inducing casts is the sway and arc, where too stiff and oversized hackle can exacerbate things. Yes, this fly is dragging due to a curling micro drag, and the opening of the brown's mouth push was going to drag this fly out of the mouth anyway. But because the hackle is too big on the fly and the fibers of that hackle too stiff, that fly literally rolled right out of the big brown's mouth. Keep in mind that with micro drag, we often get a poor hook set and fight the fish only to drop it a few seconds later. Trout-induced drag is a function of arrow straight casts in the wrong conditions. On slow water, it's patently obvious. The cast lays out and we think we don't have to mend. We pull in a length of fly line to straighten the last wiggle in our cast. The line and leader is tight, and the water to fly surface tension is primed. As the trout rises, that tension releases and the fly will actually ride out the side of the mouth or possibly right over the top of its head. While it's most common on slower water, it can be a classic induced miss on dancy riffles. In this case, a subtle wiggle cast is helpful to ensure there's some built-in slack. Improve your chances with supple or lighter 4 or 5x tippet and an ultra-sharp, wider gap hook. Another trout-induced drag can occur while using overweighted nymphs, especially on short, tight-line nymphing or dry dropper setups. This one's really interesting because the overweighting creates tension between the dry and dropper in the tippet. As the trout comes to eat, as it opens its mouth, the tension in the tippet can cause the nymph to pull along the rim of the trout's mouth and out the side. On a bigger screen, watch the black nymph literally rim the rainbow's mouth like a basketball looping a rim. It's so subtle that the dry fly might barely wiggle. More subtle tippet, a lighter bead head, and a sharp, wide-gapped hook will increase your odds. To dispel your paranoia and too much self-projecting and loathing, the last word here is that not every miss is due to micro drag. We can't project everything to be our fault. Fish simply miss their food more often than we think.
No, did he miss it?
There he goes.
Oh, I got that. Oh, and again, did you see that?
Yeah, he kept missing.